Ben Davis with the California Nuclear Initiative. Last week I spoke here after CalISO gave a report on how we were doing with nuclear power and how we're reacting to the loss of San Onofre. I've also spoke several times before during the IPER proceedings concerning basically exclusively the issue of the benefits of nuclear power. And by that I mean I was asking what they were. You might recall the first time I came before the commission, I did so because I had spoken with your staff about whether or not we could close the nuclear power plants in California. And they had informed me that we could. And then the next day they retracted that. And then I had returned to CalISO for the information and found out that they had quite a different view of it. Well, since then, as you know, your staff has been proven correct. We can do without San Onofre, without rolling blackouts, and without the associated costs. I'm here for the same reason today. I want to talk about what those potential benefits of nuclear power are. The potential detriments you covered very thoroughly, but what a state needs to consider, what our legislature needs to consider, what our governor needs to consider, and our citizens and the other agencies, all of which you report to about our energy situation in California. What we need to consider in choosing our energy sources is the benefits versus the risk. That's the classic analysis. Listening to what was presented today, basically all I heard about was risks. I made a quick list of them, and I don't think I covered everything, but one of them that wasn't mentioned so much was the ones through cooling is one of the detriments of nuclear power. Still there. The seismic potentials, not only the potentials of the unknowns of what can happen because of an earthquake, but also the tests we'll have to do. For example, the high energy tests we were talking about are also detriments if we go ahead using nuclear power. The more obvious ones are nuclear power's accident potential, which was just well described by the last speakers, and the nuclear storage, which also involves its accident potentials, and costs. These are all detriments. What I heard nothing about today was any benefits to nuclear power here. As I mentioned last week, it appeared from the report that you were given that not only do we have our 15% surplus in California without San Onofre, but we even have 5 to 8% at least more of a surplus than that. Therefore, without the operation of Diablo Canyon, which only supplies 5 to 7% of our state's energy, electrical energy, in-state electrical energy, we still have more than our standard 15% surplus. Given that, it seems like, I want to mention one more thing that from a past, one of the things you referred to me as an agency in our past discussions of the benefits of nuclear power. There's a report done in 2008 that discussed if we closed both nuclear power plants, how much of a rate, how much would it affect rates in California? I believe it came to 2.2 cents an hour, kilowatt hour or something. It was a very small amount in any event. It would have translated to about $3 per ratepayer, average ratepayer. That's certainly gone down from everything I can see now. We can close the nuclear power plant without going into our surplus, and why are we operating it then? I think the long and the short of it is this. I'm asking you, is there any evidence in these proceedings? Was there any evidence produced today that I did not notice that shows any benefit to nuclear power? Is there anything that shows our rates would be significantly affected if we closed Diablo Canyon today?
Well, we did, I'm sure PG&E would have been happy to put a bunch of stuff in the record on this. We did not specifically ask those questions. I suspect they may or may not respond later in the written comments, but we didn't specifically say to PG&E, come in and demonstrate. So, but as I said, I'm sure they're likely to respond to you.
Well, then might I suggest that you should, because when you report to the legislature and the governor and the citizens of California, as you are intended to do with this IEPR, so that we can make our energy choices, What we need to do is balance the benefits and the risk. You haven't shown us any benefits, all you've shown us is risks.
Well, in the 205 IPA report, I think we did note that nuclear power was providing carbon-free power, then that it's going, going forward cost, just looking at fuel cost, was relatively attractive. And at the same time, trying to recollect the various pieces, certainly there are a lot of people who get jobs from that. So, I mean, there are other benefits,
2005 is what you're?
What I'm recalling was there was a consultant report done in 2005, which is certainly outdated, but that certainly acknowledged some of the benefits of nuclear power in that, although it didn't try to do a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis.
No, the 2008 did a much better job. But just to conclude, what I would like to see you do, as a person that will benefit from this IEPR, is list the benefits and the risks and the evidence behind them, so I can choose, as a citizen of California, whether I want to continue to use that last nuclear power plant we're relying on. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
All right, next commenter is David Weissman.
Good afternoon, David Weissman, Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. I'd like to set up the short 2.5-minute video clip that will follow me on the overheads. Since transparency was a word we heard recurring today, my concerns, and I'm sorry that Dr. Munson of the NRC has not remained to address them, regards the openness and public observation of the SHAC process, which was an integral part of the post-Fukushima review ongoing. In March, the first ground motion SHAC was held for the Western U.S. plants in Oakland. I traveled to the event with our attorney, John Giesman, and our seismologic consultant, Dr. Douglas Hamilton, who was in the room. We gathered in the morning before the event began. Representatives came, told us we were not welcome to stay, and stayed with us as they escorted us out the door of the building. This, in spite of the fact that the actual SHAC document, authored by Dr. Robert Budnitz, who we will hear from momentarily in the video, says on page 56, SHAC level transparency for level 3, interested parties can view the interactions at the workshops. Where interveners in the case at the PUC seemed to make us interested parties, we were escorted from the room. No video was taken of this meeting, so we cannot be aware of what was said in our absence. The question remains, what part of this ground motion characterization is so fragile that it cannot withstand mere public observation? And how is any public confidence in this process engendered when the public is precluded from simply observing it, nor is any video, nor to our record any transcription of the events that took place? But we decided to let the safety committee, of whom Dr. Lehman, you've heard from, tackle this question for us. So if you could please roll the tape, that might help explain.
And I'll start with Weissman's comment first. I was there at that workshop on a technical, you understand why we're there. We ought to be there. We have a stake in understanding that, and I was there. And Giesman and Weissman and there was a third colleague were there when it started. Then I looked around at the coffee break and they weren't there, and I didn't have any idea why. And when I asked, I was told that they were asked to leave. I have no idea why that was. I know that PG&E was not the instigator of that. So I don't have any idea about that. I was as unhappy as you were with the notion that it wouldn't be an open meeting, open to, by the way, members of the public, not to participate, but just to observe. That was the understanding of PG&E as well. And I don't have any idea what's going to be done about that, except I've said some words to people, but again, because it's outside our remit, it's not something where we're going to take a position.
Since Mr. Weissman and Mr. Giesman brought this subject matter of denial of access to that meeting to the attention of the committee, I do want to make an inquiry to our legal counsel's office. Is there somewhere that the committee can make an inquiry on behalf of a member of the public to see if any information may be released to them for the sake of public safety? So that's an inquiry I would like to ask our legal counsel's office to make.
So there's a couple of things I'd like to say and answer, particularly to Mr. Weissman and Mr. Giesman. As Bob Budnitz has pointed out, within our charter, we don't, I think, have the direct authority to address the specific problem of not being allowed to participate in and view these workshops. But I'd just like to register my personal thoughts on that topic, which I think it's a poor decision to exclude members of the public from that type of meeting. It's in fact just downright boneheaded because it's counterproductive in many different ways. And I'm not sure that there's anything that we can do as an independent safety committee, but I'm certainly willing to express my personal opinion. But I think that that was a mistake on the part of the people who made those decisions.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, I regret, I looked around to see that I guess Dr. Munson has left for the day, so.
So it's now on our record, but you know, we obviously don't have jurisdiction over that. But yeah.
No, I
Thanks for bringing that to our
think
attention.
transparency would help. I just, you know, presumably this would great for your money. And it's to some of the you see challenges.
All right, our next commenter is Martha Sullivan from Coalition to Decommission San Onofre.
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Sullivan, and I'm a representative of the Coalition to Decommission San Onofre. And we are happy that our name has, played out the way we hoped it would. We're a locally based coalition of grassroots organizations in Southern California that came together in the last year to advocate on behalf of the 9 million people who live within 50 miles of San Onofre. And I just wanted to make the point here that we intend to continue to advocate for Southern Californians. Our focus is going to continue to be on ratepayers and that they not, bear a disproportionate burden for Southern California Edison's management mistakes and poor choices. We're also obviously going to be very focused on the decommissioning process and making sure there continues to be a public voice in that. We're also concerned about the workers who are going to be displaced by this economic transition. And so we've made other suggestions to the PUC and other decision makers to try to incentivize and encourage in whatever way we can Edison to transition those employees to what we believe continues to be the future of California, and that the Energy Commission and the PUC both have had a hand in directing us to, which is energy efficiency and renewables. That's a burgeoning marketplace. It's where our economy is transitioning to, and we need to help those workers to make this economic transition, just as in past transitions between industry and technology and so forth. And then finally, I wanted to reinforce a couple of people who made this point earlier, and I want to really reinforce it from a local perspective of the people who live in the shadow of these plants. This point was made during the wonderful seminar in San Diego a couple of weeks ago, where former Prime Minister Khan and former NRC Chair Yasko and another former NRC Commission member, and then Arnie Gunderson, who's an expert witness who's been working for Friends of the Earth on this. And Arnie shared a slide which really sort of captured a key point that we need to keep in mind, which is that the NRC's probabilistic risk analysis claims basically one meltdown in 200 years, a 200-year event. But history shows that there have been 5 meltdowns in 35 years. So I think that really highlights the weakness of probabilistic risk assessment. And I think we all need to bear that in mind. And it's something that former Chair Yasko commented on as well, that he believed it's time to move past that and not use that as our standard for determining what an appropriate level of planning and preparation should be for an accident or a disaster at one of these plants. That's going to continue to be a factor for the people who live within these plants, even as they're decommissioned, because that spent fuel is going to be there for the foreseeable future. We don't have any other plan for it. And then finally, I just wanted to emphasize that we're very glad to hear Edison today talking about aggressive use of preferred resources, which in California means renewables and energy efficiency. But we want to caution about, continuing with this idea of new fossil generation as a quote backstop. Our experience is that when there's new fossil generation, that's not a backstop. It becomes an obstacle to the full development and deployment of available technologies for renewable energy and for energy efficiency. And so, necessity is the mother of invention. We've shown that in the last year and a half with the outage of San Onofre. We've gotten through it without any blackouts or without any extreme measures. And so I would really encourage, keep our eye on the ball, keep our eye on California's goals to move to a renewable energy economy and one that emphasizes energy efficiency and demand side management. And don't be sucked back into, the fossil fuel addiction. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. As lead on energy efficiency here at the Commission, I can definitely say I'm bending over backwards to make that happen as much as we can. There are a couple of different forums where we're trying to do that along with demand response. At the same time, we're up here, knocking on the melamine. We're knocking on the wood to appear at the dais on this summer and next summer, and hoping kind of events go our way.
Thank you.
As well. But thanks for your comments.
Next, we have Barbara George.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mr. Strickland said after Fukushima, we learned that more than one unit could be affected. Previously, we assumed that only one unit would be involved. To me, this is a stunning lack of common sense. If I'm in a car wreck or if I'm in an earthquake and something collapses on me, why would I ever assume that I'm only going to have one broken bone or that only one person in the car is going to be hurt? I think that there are blind spots in the nuclear industry that we really have to be watchful for. Another example, just before Diablo Canyon was licensed, the transcript of a closed hearing on emergency planning was leaked to the press. Chairman Palladino said, "Earthquakes are no worse than fog," or whatever. And the commission decided that it didn't need to discuss earthquakes in emergency planning because they had a precedent. They hadn't considered that in licensing for San Onofre. And so thanks to an appeals court decision by the Honorable Robert Bork, that is still the situation today in 2013. But I'd like to point out to you that the NRC preemption is only for on-site emergency planning. The state and local governments share responsibility for emergency planning off-site. The CEC should take leadership on this and immediately hold hearings on the impacts of quakes on emergency planning. Some of the things to consider, you might want to talk about broken overpasses that might block evacuations in the 10-mile zone. Workers might not be able to get to the plant to prevent a meltdown. Outside the 10-mile zone where people are supposed to shelter in place, the windows might all be broken and quake-damaged buildings might collapse on them. Hospitals that are only marginally prepared for radiological emergencies What if they're flooded with earthquake victims as well? At the Coastal Commission hearing, PG&E was asked, what would they do if the earthquake study showed that a quake would be beyond Diablo's design basis? What did they respond? Nothing. They wouldn't do anything. I'm really not sure why we're spending all this money on earthquake studies. It's a good thing to look at earthquakes, but nobody can predict them. The USGA website says nobody can know the magnitude of a fault because it can change after the quake begins. We already know there's earthquake faults right near these plants. Tohoku, the quake in Japan, was 100 miles away and deep underground. I'd like to know, is this really about oil and gas exploration off the coast of California, funded by ratepayers? Thanks. Just one last thing. We're going to wrap up and replace San Onofre. And we need to use the cleanest resources possible. This is something I've been working on with Commissioner Florio in the procurement case. But it's all very murky and has been for a long time. I've been calling for 2 years for a public process to develop clean replacement resources. And then this morning, the SCE mentioned something about a living pilot for preferred resources, but I haven't seen any RFP on that. So I'd like to know, what we're going to do in a public process. I think it's time to get together in the public. And I really urge you as regulators to start taking this on. California, if we have an earthquake and a meltdown at Diablo, we're looking at the food supply for the United States. I mean, come on. Even if you don't care about the people, how about the money involved? And that's something that Mr. Lloyd Levine actually mentioned last year at the hearing it was 2 years ago at the hearing. And I'm sorry, I don't think we're much further ahead, except San Onofre is shut down, thank goodness. But the fuel pools could still cause major problems.
Next we have Ray Lutz.
Thank you. My name's Ray Lutz. I'm with Citizens Oversight, and we encourage citizens to become more involved in their governmental agencies like this one. So you guys are doing a great job. Glad to be here for the first time. Now, I got caught on one thing that you said I thought was really good, and that was that some of these questions that are before you are philosophical in nature and deal with a lot of ethics. Of course they are. Of course they are. That's why you're here. All these questions, if they get this far, are supposed to be philosophical in nature and have ethical issues. So I'd like to speak to that a little bit. Now, my background's in electrical engineering. When I was in college, the 3 Mile Island disaster occurred. And I realized that these plants are extremely complex. Even the valve that got stuck at 3 Mile Island, I don't know if you ever looked at it. I couldn't even understand this valve. It's so complex, it's unbelievable. It's almost more complex than the whole plant. And this was the one that was stuck. Humans, overestimate our ability to get things right. This is what it comes down to. We think we can get things right really easily. This came out when software designers first started to make, Fortran language and so forth. They realized it was really hard to get the programs right. It was hard to get all the bugs out. Really hard. Really hard. A good example, San Onofre. They started to design new steam generators, and there was no earthquake, there was no tsunami, there was nothing, no disaster. They just couldn't get it right. So what makes us think all the rest of it will be right? It's very impossible to believe this. Now, safety is one of our key issues that guys are supposed to be chartered to deal with. All government agencies are. Got police, military. We spend a lot of money on this. Always give everybody congratulations when they're helping out with their safety. We hear about safety being number one by all these utilities. If you go to a manufacturing firm and they talk about safety number one, they will shut down the production line if there's something unsafe in it. So we see here, though, the production line is still running. We know that these earthquakes can occur. And yet, they'll still keep the plant running, even though they know that they don't even have the answer. They couldn't answer my question. What is the probability of a disaster? No answer. You should shut down the production line. It's over. But what happens here? There's something driving this. It has to be only one thing that I know of is profit. Somebody has to be making money here or something, or else this wouldn't be happening. I just want to mention really quick, the carbon-free power, that's not true. There's no such thing as carbon-free power. Maybe right at that one point when you're making electricity here in the state, then it is. But there's the whole cycle that it is, and I just want to make sure that that's, even solar panels are not carbon-free. You got to make the damn things. But please continue to push the way you are. I really think that you guys are doing a great job. Consider those ethical questions. We're not going to be able to get it right. We can't, and so be safe. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Rochelle, you wanted to make one quick additional comment?
I wasn't sure if I should mention the legislation that we have before the Utilities and Commerce Committee this coming Monday, because it's a C4 issue versus a C3 issue, and I don't have a lot of money, so I can't afford to do it wrong, so I just wanted to wear my second hat here. But it's SB 418. We would very much like your support for this bill. It is a nuclear transparency bill, and what it asks is that PG&E put all foreseeable costs, the costs of alternatives to run-through cooling, possible expansion of emergency planning, seismic events, a list of things that the NRC has already told you we need to have from the lessons learned from Fukushima. We would like to see that put into a legislation. It's not that we don't trust the PUC, it's just that the PUC has not always been worthy of our trust. And therefore, as much as I like Commissioner Florio, I'd like to see the PUC itself support this, so they don't have any wiggle room. PG&E applied for a license renewal prematurely once in 2010, and they hadn't finished their AB 1632 requirements. And the PUC didn't say to them, take your application and go home when you have. They said, here, waste 18 months of everybody's time and we'll dismiss it. Well, let's not do that again. Let's make sure that they have to answer these questions. So I'm leaving copies of SB 418 and a fact sheet. I know that you have channels that some of you have to go through, but not all of you have to go through to get there. And so I really would appreciate it if you would expedite those channels and support this legislation. Thank you.
So I'll just point
I
out.
was going to say, the Energy Commission does not take positions on pending legislation.
Could you recommend that they do? I mean, could
No, we
recommend that they
don't.
support it?
We do not take positions. We make recommendations to the Resource Agency and the Governor's Office, and the Governor's Office will eventually decide what to do. But
Well, then recommend that they support the bill. You're not off the hook. Okay, I'll deal with you.
All right, is there anyone else in the room who would like to make a comment before we move to the WebEx? All right, can you open Donna Gilmore's line, please? Donna, your line is open. Did you have a comment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was listening to the statements about all the earthquake studies going on, and just looking at the USGS app page, the frequently asked questions, it says that they cannot determine the magnitude of the earthquake. They've never ever been able to predict a major earthquake, that minor earthquake faults can produce major earthquakes. And this is a known fact, so I don't understand the point of all these studies when we know both of the nuclear plants are sitting on active earthquakes. And then I noticed in the last speaker from the USGS, Hardebeck, she had a chart showing the maximum earthquake estimate. I have a question. Does her estimate assume that the length of the fault is not going to change after the earthquake starts? And if so, why would she make such an assumption, since the fact is that it can change? I don't know if this is just comment, or I can actually ask a question like that.
I believe Ms. Hardybeck has already left, unfortunately, but your question.
Already left.
Yeah, so this is
Okay.
more for public comments at this point.
Yeah, okay. And then they said the justification for these studies is to decrease uncertainty. That's the only justification. How can you decrease uncertainty if no one can predict a major earthquake? It doesn't make any logical sense to me at all. I'm hoping somebody can answer that. And I have information on the SanOfreeSafety.org website that gives the backup for the statements I'm making about the USGS quote, if anybody's interested. And then I have another question, I don't know if it fits in here or not, but I understand in Baldwin Park, they are doing fracking right on the Inglewood-Newport Fault, which runs right by San Onofre. And is that an issue that the commission plans to address? I guess that's a question. That's all I have right now.
So on that final question, we're not the agency that would be looking at that particular issue. That would be probably over the Department of Oil and Gas Resources, where they actually look at fracking and the associated environmental impacts of that.
Well, that might be the case. I don't think they're looking at the impact on the nuclear plant.
They actually do regulate the fracking activity, and that I guess I don't know whether that would fall within their bailiwick to extend the analysis to that issue that you bring up. But thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, my understanding is there isn't much regulation at all on that issue, so I have a feeling there may be a disconnect. We may need some overlap between agencies to make sure it's covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gilmore. Can we open up the phone lines now to see if we have anybody on the phone who'd like to make a comment? Hold on just a moment, we're still opening the lines. Okay, the phone lines are open. Is there anyone who has a question? Excuse me.
This is Bruce Campbell. I just wanted to supplement what Donna Gilmore just said. Anyway, it's the Inglewood oil field in the Baldwin Hills area, which is LA County and a bit into Culver City, and that's along the Newport Inglewood Fault, and it's the largest urban oil field in the nation, I believe. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks for that information. Is there anyone else on the phone who would like to make a comment? Yes. Hello? Yes? Yes, you're on the line. Hello?
You might have heard me trying to answer my other phone, but I do have a question. This is J.A. Savage. Sorry. I didn't know that it was that open. So if there's I'm sorry, J.A. Savage, I'm editor of California Current, and if there's an Edison person there, is there an Edison person there anymore?
I think they all have left.
Yes, I think they all have left.
Okay. I'll just ask you guys to
So you can say
keep an eye
anything you
out.
want about it. You can say anything you want about Edison now.
It's not a comment, it's a question. So PG&E has been acting as its own contractor in decommissioning the Humboldt Bay nuclear power plant. And so I have discovered over the years that there's really no checks and balances because the utility is decommissioning its own power plant. My question to Edison, you might ask them, is whether Edison plans to decommission San Onofre or whether they have a third party that they plan on using, where there might be some checks and balances, kind of like the one of the oversight boards.
Well, some of us keep nominating that to be phase 5 in Commissioner Floyd's case.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much.
All right, we're opening the next line. Is there any comments on the phone? Okay, lines are open. Going once, going twice. Any last comments on the phone? All right, I think think we have gotten everybody.
Thank
We
you,
did have
Suzanne.
the written comments. I don't know if you wanted to, a gentleman did request to have them read into the record.
As long as they're short.
It's 3 short paragraphs.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. This is from a Mr. Frank Brandt, who asked our indulgence. We don't normally do this, but he's 91 years old, and it's very difficult for him to get here and for him to use the phone or the WebEx. So, Governor Brown, the state legislature, and the CEC are all opposed to using nuclear energy for generating electricity. The principal but unstated function of this workshop is to devise more arguments against using nuclear energy. In this atmosphere, why bother with a workshop to show that an undiscovered earthquake fault might cause problems at Songs or Diablo Canyon? Why not just put a paragraph in the 2013 IPR recommending that Songs and Diablo be shut down as soon as replacement power can be purchased and or developed because they're not good energy sources? On the other hand, why not use this workshop to get the CEC to figure out how to turn the state government around to a policy of encouraging nuclear power plants? Nuclear is an excellent energy source which can generate reliable and inexpensive electricity without production of greenhouse gas. Granted that it has problems, but they are all soluble by good engineering, unlike the huge problems of wind and solar energy that cannot be solved. Diffuse and unreliable energy sources simply cannot be used to replace reliable energy sources. The CEC is fearful of the governor and state legislature, but it must be brave and offer good advice instead of just telling the legislature what it wants to hear. It's time for the CEC to incorporate this message in the 2013 IPR. AB 32 and other restrictive state laws must be revised to allow nuclear energy as the preferred energy source if the state wishes to reduce state greenhouse gas production in a meaningful way. So, on that note.
Thanks, Suzanne. We really, we really appreciate your commitment to process, because I think it really is important. It's the right signal to be sending. It's the right thing to do. And certainly here, as in any other forum at the commission, there's the Public Advisor's Office as well that people can use to submit their concerns, comments, input on any of our proceedings, including here in the IPR and elsewhere in the commission. We are now at 10 after 5. I really see a good attendance here, so kudos to you all for sticking it out until the bitter end. And I think it's been a productive workshop, and thanks to all the speakers in the morning and the afternoon for being here and the quality of their presentations. Really enjoyed the dialogue. Again, very much appreciate Commissioner Florio being here and the PUC's involvement. A lot of these issues, really the nuts and bolts get twisted and hammered and worked out over there, and so we'll look forward to working in any way we can to facilitate that process as well. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, I'd like to thank folks for being here today and for their participation. Certainly, this is one of the stages of the IPR. We will, yes, what's our next? Suzanne must know when our next IPR workshop is.
Our next IPR workshop is on June 26th, and it's on transportation forecasts.
Okay, and remind people when their written comments are due from today's?
They're due on July 3rd, as posted up here on the slide. This is the process for submitting them.
And she might even entertain shifting that to the 5th, but anyway.
All right. Our next 2 workshops are actually on transportation, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I think that's right. Okay, so we have the smorgasbord continues, and we're going to have a nice couple of, with Janae, with Commissioner Scott up here and helping us work the transportation issues that are on the docket for the IPR. So looking forward to that. I think we stand adjourned.
Thank you very much, everyone.